Hello, and welcome to today's installment of the Timeline. Today we're going to be covering the Iraq War, which can also be called the Second Persian Gulf War. Refer back to the Persian Gulf War stuff that we did a couple lessons ago. The first Persian Gulf War was 1990 and 1991. This is the Iraq War, which is kind of a continuation of the Persian Gulf War, but started in 2003. It's hard to say when it ends. We're not really far enough in history yet past it to know for sure when it's over. It was officially declared over in 2011, but we do still have a troop presence there. Iraq is still fairly unstable, and as you're going to hear in this little story, there is a bigger threat in Iraq now, which is ISIS. The Iraq War, also known as the Second Persian Gulf War. In 2003, President George W. Bush declared war against the government of Saddam Hussein. After years of largely ignoring Saddam Hussein as a dictator who was a bad guy bully to his own people, the United States claimed to have intelligence that Saddam Hussein had gained access to weapons of mass destruction, also called WMDs. Weapons of mass destruction can include nuclear weapons, biological weapons. So a biological weapon would be a contagious disease that would be weaponized, meant that you could spread it throughout a large population. So you would take an extremely contagious disease with a high mortality rate and drop it sort of like a bomb over a huge city center. People who then, it would usually be an inhaled sort of virus, an airborne virus. People who then breathe it in become contagious. Some of them get sick and die. Some of them may not get sick and die, but they can pass it on to lots and lots of other people then. The R-naught factor is, you may have heard that with COVID too. The R-naught factor is how many people each infected person is likely to infect. So an R-naught factor of 1 means that if you are contagious with the disease, you are likely to infect one other person. An R-naught factor of 16, for example, would be a disease where if you are the one person who's infected, you might be likely to infect 16 other people, and each one of those people could then infect 16 other people, and disease spreads exponentially with that kind of contagion. So that's a biological weapon. A chemical weapon could also be considered a weapon of mass destruction. Chemical weapons contain toxic chemicals, which could be deployed like a bomb to affect large numbers of people. Often these affect either your lungs, it may turn your lungs to liquid, or they affect your brain and your brain's ability to communicate with the rest of your body. They affect your neurological functioning. There are a wide variety of things that they could do. So let me back that sentence up there. Weapons of mass destruction can include nuclear weapons, biological weapons, and chemical weapons. The United States invaded Iraq in 2003, despite not having the support of several of our usual allies. Saddam Hussein was captured at the end of 2003, turned over to the Iraqi people, found guilty of lots of things, and put to death in 2006. Okay, this is one place where the United States absolutely does it correctly. Doing it wrong would have looked like the United States saying, wait, you're not mature enough, or you're not capable of dealing with your own problems, so we'll just take Saddam Hussein and put him on trial and decide whether or not he's guilty. We don't do that. We hand him over to his own people and say, look, you've been the one suffering under him, you decide what he's guilty of, you decide what his punishment should be. They did. They put him to death by hanging, found him guilty of all kinds of things, and we kind of left it as their deal. We helped them to capture him, but we didn't come up with his punishment. But, as it turns out, there were no weapons of mass destruction. And this is part of why teaching fairly recent history is difficult. When we look back on, okay, so when the United States said that we had evidence that he had weapons of mass destruction, what was that evidence? Were we really just looking for an excuse, or what did we honestly, legitimately believe that there were weapons of mass destruction? And that's still kind of floating around out there. We're not entirely sure at this point in time what the answer to that question is. And the United States didn't have a great plan for what to do next after Saddam Hussein was out of power. While he was a dictator and a bad guy bully to his own people, Saddam Hussein was a stable bad guy who was keeping a lid on a lot of other potential conflicts in the country. With Saddam Hussein out of power, a civil war erupted in Iraq. Many different groups wanted to fill the power vacuum created when Saddam Hussein suddenly stopped being dictator after so many years. Most United States military casualties occurred in the post-Saddam Hussein period, as we attempted to stabilize the country. The United States formally ended its military occupation of Iraq in 2011, although Iraq is still a large source of concern. In 2006, the terrorist organization associated with Al-Qaeda, now known as ISIS, declared its intent to form an Islamic State in Iraq and Syria. And clearly then that's tied the Iraq war in with the war on terror later, even though initially they don't have anything to do with each other. The terrorists had nothing to do with Iraq, nothing to do with Saddam Hussein, until we pulled him out of power and created this power vacuum where all these other groups rushed to try and fill the void in Iraq. Okay, thanks!